here we are 2 weeks post Oscars, and people are still losing their minds over Green Book.
They'll be okay.
They'll be okay. You know, the most interesting part of this is that a lot of people are now, if you can call it blaming, they're blaming Spielberg for twisting people's arms to vote for Green Book because Roma was a Netflix release. Gotta be honest, I don't think Roma ever had a chance.
For Best Picture.
No,
not after it got nominated for Best Foreign Picture. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it wasn't. It was very popular among the producers. It was pretty popular among actors. Everybody loves Mahershala Ali. Who doesn't love Mahershala Ali? I mean, he's the first person since Jason Robards to win 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
That's and only the third person ever. Walter Brennan won 3 out of 5 Best Supporting Actors in the 1930s, from like 36 to 40. And then Jason Robards won 2 in a row in the 70s. Now Mahershala Ali. That's good company, man.
And I got to tell you, Mahershala sort of came out of nowhere. Now, I know that's never true.
Yeah.
Always 25 years of hard work goes into coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So I know that's, but in terms of that's just sort of impact.
Yeah.
Boom. But there it is.
It was 2 things in 1 year. It was Moonlight and Luke Cage. And he was great on Luke Cage, man. I mean, that's where I first saw him. I had never seen the guy before that. And here he is on Luke Cage just being all badass and terrifying and ruthless. And I thought, that's a hell of an actor. Yeah. Where'd that guy come from? And then he shows up in Moonlight and wins an Oscar, and now it's all over. Now he's a true detective, and he's the man.
I heard someone say, I don't know, but someone said to me, hey, wouldn't he be an interesting Bond? And I'm like, really?
Why?
What? How did we get there? I'm like, sometimes in this town.
I know. This is where people get where people run out of they run out of runway trying to show how sort of forward thinking and progressive they are, right? Yeah. It's like, well, we've got a female Doctor Who. We could have a black American James Bond. No, you can't.
No, you can't.
No, you can't.
You can't. You can't.
Can't.
Busta Rhymes can't play James Bond either. I got a whole list of a lot of people that can't play James Bond. Well, just cut it out with that, man.
But seriously, why would he even want to? Even if that were anywhere in the realm of possibility, the world is open to him now. He is playing a character over a 50-year, 30-year span on True Detective.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity that is.
So that's the silliest thing in the world.
Gosh, that's nuts. No, the thing that's interesting is now that Spielberg is very openly lobbying for a rule change. Well, there are 2 things that we should talk about here real quickly that are going to happen in the next few weeks. So there's going to be a meeting of the Academy governors in the next month or so, and they're going to end of March, I guess it is, and they're going to talk about rules changes as they do once a year after the Oscars. And one of them is that Spielberg is heavily pushing for the idea that you have to be exclusively in theaters, not streaming, not available on SVOD, nothing. You got to be in theaters for 4 weeks before you show up anywhere else. And that's meant to really twist Netflix's arms, saying, if you got a movie you want to put up for Oscars, put it out in theaters for 4 weeks, then put it on Netflix.
Yeah, and they tried to do that at Cannes.
They did, and the French rebelled too. The French revolted, and they got to understand, that I get it. Not being in theaters is part of your whole deal. That people, hey, I don't need to go to the theaters. I can stay home and see a Will Smith movie. But at the same time, the Oscars are different from the Emmys for a very simple reason. It's the difference between that big screen down the street and the one in your living room.
They're completely different academies.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I suppose what we in fact have to deal with is most people are watching most of these movies at their house on big gigantic screens with amazing sound systems and except for big tentpole movies, I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So the Academy has to figure out a way to do this without cutting off its nose to spite its face.
And part of it, they are trying to support the exhibition business, trying to keep the exhibition model alive, and which has taken some hits. But the only way to do that is make better movies.
Yeah.
But if you are making great movies,
better movies at lower prices.
Better movies at lower prices and charge less for them.
Yeah.
put them into theaters, leave them there longer.
That's what I meant by lower price.
Yeah. And but less expensively too.
Yeah,
you know?
make
no
less.
more...
Look, if you're gonna make a $200 million movie, then it ought to be in a big old tent pole that's gonna be.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, most movies don't have to cost that much money.
No.
I can remember Out of Africa, I think cost $30 million.
It did, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And today that would be considered a pauper's film.
I know.
So that's just insane.
Yeah.
A Meryl Streep, Robert Redford film.
But still, we see enough movies. You can go to Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, and you can spend $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million and make something that looks like $150 million movie here.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those Thai epics, the Legend of Surya Thai and Bang Rajan, these things with thousands of extras and battle scenes and costumes and elephants and gold leaf, decor. Those things are like $15, $20 million tops.
Yeah.
And they look, so you don't have to settle for these things.
Yeah.
So anyway, it'll be very interesting. The other thing, have you been keeping up on the Writers Guild and the agency thing?
No.
Have you been following
What's
this?
going on?
So apparently it's about every 42 years, I think it is, that the writers renegotiate their contract with the agencies.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't happened since about 1977.
Really?
That was the last time.
Well, what would there be to negotiate other than?
Here's what there is to negotiate: packaging fees.
Oh.
The feeling is now that in this brave new world, and there has been a lot written about this, and a number of editorials basically pointing out that packaging fees are now how the agencies make most of their money,
Mm-hmm.
and they very often do so at the expense of their clients.
Mm-hmm.
And
They're
that the-
pimping their clients. Is what's happening.
That's exactly it. That the
and-
clients now basically work for the agencies, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And that the agencies are making huge amounts of money, even when writers aren't. Writers' salaries have gone down, agencies' earnings have gone up.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're not necessarily serving the best interests of the writers they represent. And that under the law, and I've listened to a number of podcasts on this. Our friend David Weishart has been really following this. That basically this is not like negotiating with the studios, where the studios have the upper hand. The writers want something, and the studios have it to give them, which is work.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's the agencies who want something, which is namely clients to represent.
Mm-hmm.
So the Writers Guild is in a power position here, and what they're demanding is that agencies, number one, give up all packaging. You will no longer take a packaging fee. You can keep packaging, but you'll be packaging for 10% of all of the clients that you attach to it.
Yeah.
You will not be saying, okay, we're going to waive the fees from the clients, and we're going to just take a piece of the show.
Mm-hmm.
We want 3% of every episode, and we want, it's like a 3-3-10% split between interest, and we want some back end. And then they create these side shell companies that are actually production companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, look, MCA was forced out of the agenting business back in the 60s for doing that, and they became a studio. They owned Universal. So you're now violating that consent decree. You need to decide, are you an agency or a production company?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a production company, you will no longer be fiduciary for any of these clients. You are going to make movies, and they'll go elsewhere. So the ultimatum here is that when April 9, I think, is D-Day, they're taking a vote with the WGA end of March, and come April 9 or whatever, if the agencies, basically the big four, are the ones that are sort of in the crosshairs, CAA, WME,
Morris,
ICM,
APA,
ICM, and UTA.
UTA.
Those are the four that are in the crosshairs because they do all the packaging, right? They're the ones that take all the packaging fees for 86% of TV shows, something like that.
Which effectively makes them the complete gatekeepers.
Complete gatekeepers
of what gets made.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what a lot of producers have said, which is, I can't get a show on the even made unless I pay my extortion fee to the agencies. And the studios don't want to run afoul of the agencies because then talent will be withheld from them. So the Writers Guild, and apparently with the backing of some other guilds as well, is saying when an April 9 rolls around, if the agencies have not agreed, we expect all of our members, every writer if you are represented by an agent in one of those agencies that has not signed the new agreement, we expect you will fire your agent and go to a new agency that has signed on, or we expect your agent to leave that agency and go to another agency that is a signatory. So it's and I don't see how the big agencies survive that. You're going to have to agree, and you're going to have to just kill your packaging fee situation, or you're going to have to decide to become a production company.
And this is found money anyway. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're still going to be making your 10% that you get from representing writers and negotiating fees. You want to make more money? Negotiate bigger fees for your writer.
There you go.
Your 10% goes up.
That's
the way you make more money.
Yeah.
The fee. Yeah, the package. I've always thought there was something shady about that, dude.
Yeah. Yeah,
Always.
and it's quite interesting how the some of the breakdowns, because you look at some of the breakdowns, and a lot of people have been writing about this, but a lot of the breakdowns talk about how that money that the agency is making is coming out of the pocket of the showrunner, coming out of the pockets of the writers. That it's coming off the top of the show, and everybody thinks, oh, I'm getting a piece. They're not taking my fee, and I get a bigger piece of the show. Yeah, but they took a piece off the top of the show, so now there's less show for you to get a piece of.
Yeah. Literally fewer human beings work on that show.
Yeah.
Actors making less money than they would have been making. Producers making less money than they would have been making. All of it to go into servicing that packaging fee for a group of agencies.
Yeah.
And if you have a couple of agencies team up on it, they could basically block out three-quarters of the talent.
And that's also the funny thing is that, if you're packaging, and you have two agencies, well, it's not really a package anymore, is it? Now it's two agencies.
Yeah.
Well, it's called a co-packaging fee at that point, right? Then they start playing that game, and it's
this is since the days of Mike Ovitz.
Yes,
this is about the shadiest age, because Mike Ovitz and a few hot shots before him pretty much took the business away from the studios.
They did,
and big mega agents became the guys.
This is our big D-Day moment. So this is the next few weeks are going to, between what the Academy does vis-a-vis Netflix and what the Writers Guild does vis-a-vis the agencies. By the beginning of April, we could be looking at a whole different Hollywood.
Yeah. And in terms of talent, writers, actors, maybe not so much directors, because a lot of directors are producers. But in terms of the creative talent, it's going to make a big damn difference.
It sure will.
Yeah,
it sure will. So we're going to get into our foreign films right now. We haven't covered foreign in a while. We've got a lot of great foreign, including some Oscar-nominated stuff and award season stuff, and we got a couple of giveaways. Boy, do we have some great giveaways. They are both from Wellgo, who releases tons of really, really terrific Asian material, mostly, not exclusively, but mostly. And the first one is a film excuse me, that got heaps and heaps of love from the Los Angeles Film Critics Association, and mainly for Steven Yeun, who won our Best Supporting Actor award. Steven Yeun from The Walking Dead, who performs a completely Korean language role in Burning by Lee Chang-dong. I was not a fan of Burning, but man, my colleagues went nuts for it, and I know Tim is more partial to it than I. So I will say this about it. Burning, first of all, is a long movie. It's about 2.5 hours long. And it is it's interesting for a while, at least, in that it's a drama about.
I liked it a little bit more than you. Our Justin Chang.
Justin went nuts for it, and part of the problem is that the emails are flying back and forth, and by about the 10th person who said Burning should be considered for everything, I was thinking, well, I gotta see this.
Yeah.
And I put it on, and I'm sitting there for about an hour and 45 minutes, and there's this guy who's a little bit disconnected from society, and he's got, he's like trying to tend to his dad's farm while his dad has legal trouble, and then he gets involved with this woman who's very, flighty and then she comes back with she used to be fat when they were in school, and now she's cute, and so they have a relationship, and then she comes back from some kind of foreign trip with this other guy who's a super rich playboy played by Steven Yeun, and so now there's like a love triangle going on and all these weird emotions, and this is okay, fair enough, but by the time I'm about 2 hours into this movie, and not much has happened other than the fact that there's kind of a Vertigo-y twist.
Yeah, all that stuff with the burning, the burning. By the way, somebody's burning. What are they? They're not. They're greenhouses.
Yeah, burning greenhouses. Yeah. There's like some arson of greenhouses going on. And I'm just sitting there going, honestly, if this is a metaphor, just pay it off soon, please. If it's not a metaphor, could you get to the point? It's just really kind of, and then it wound up basically being a certain kind of a genre film. I won't tell you what kind of genre film, but I'm like, really? Is that it? Like you toy with me for 2.5 hours going, ooh, am I this? Am I this? Maybe I'm this. Maybe I'm that. Oh, maybe I'm that. Oh, could I be? No, I'm just this over here. I'm just a typical run of the mill.
Yeah.
And I was kind of pissed off at that point. I really resented that. However, I am a total minority on this. Everyone else loves this movie. Like, everyone else loves this movie. So I will be totally fair. Tim, take it away. Why is Burning cool?
Well, it was. I did appreciate the film. It's fairly meditative. It moves so incredibly slowly. The beautiful young lady who's in it, and that little odd love triangle that they're going on, leads to a few interesting moments. But no, I fall in between, someplace in the middle. It's a film that I appreciate more than one that I deeply, deeply like. But I did appreciate it.
Well, we've got that. So we have Burning. We have 3 copies of Burning to give away, and then we have 4 copies of Rampant, which is also a well-go release of a Korean film. This is a period Korean film, an action genre film that's actually quite good. It takes place in ancient Korea, and you've got these things that are called night demons that are terrorizing the people, and a hero has to rise to lead the pushback against these like undead, like zombie monster things that are terrorizing the land. Anyway, it's called Rampant, and it's basically a Korean ghost movie, kind of a zombie movie. It's like a ghost movie, a zombie movie, all in one. But it's they make good ones. Train to Busan, which was made previously by the same studio, is still in that range as well. Train to Busan is an allegorical zombie movie set on a train. Koreans love their trains. Remember, what was the ice?
The icebreaker. The train about the train going through the ice. Yeah.
So anyway, Korean films keep getting better and better, and their production value is just top notch. So Rampant, like a medieval Korean World War Z, let's call it that. Anyway, we have 4 copies of that, and that is, for genre fans, really cool. So if you want to be in the running for this, here's what you got to do. Got to send us an email to gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com. And make sure the email gets to us no later than Sunday the 17th. And if it's dated Monday the 18th, not going to be able to do anything. But Sunday the 17th, if we see that time and date stamped on the email, then we can roll with it. So Sunday the 17th is your deadline. Send us an email that says Rampant, Rampant, in the subject line, name and address in the body of the email. Send it to gods@cinegods.com or gods@digigods.com. And if you want to be in the running for one of the 3 copies of Burning, go ahead and send us an email with Burning in the subject line. Burning. No funny spellings, please. gods@cinegods.com or gods@digigods.com. Name and address in the body of the email. And by Sunday the 17th, we will have a drawing and randomly select the winners. So there it is. 2 really cool Korean films, one of which I kind of liked and the other of which I didn't like, but Tim liked and everyone else liked, so what am I? I'm somebody who doesn't like Burning. That's it. And let's move on. We got more cool stuff.
Including a couple more neat foreign films. This one, Shoplifters, which was a film that was talked about.
Kore-eda.
Film that was talked about.
Won the Cannes Film Festival and got an Oscar nomination.
Kind of a neat little movie. We meet this family. This family seems to be a sort of like small time crime family going around doing things like shoplifting and whatnot. They run across this little boy, and they sort of adopt this little boy into their family in a fairly complicated sort of way. The little boy seems to have been left alone by his family. And what we come to find out is that this family really isn't a family per se. And in other words, the blood ties that it looks like they all have are not there, but they've really sort of aggregated themselves together in this sort of way. And this is what they do. They do all of these they have all kinds of little things that they do in order to survive. And the little boy and the little girl they come to wonder whether or not this is the way that they ought to be living, whether or not the stealing and whatnot that they're doing is correct. It's a really sort of interesting film. Funny is mostly what it is. I found
it's a very sweet film.
It's a very sweet and funny little movie.
It's also, Kore-eda's career is so interesting, and his films can be pretty emotionally blunt sometimes too. They're always very humanistic, but sometimes they get to a really raw nerve. And I didn't find that Shoplifters got so raw. Shoplifters has a more kind of has a lighter, more uplifting touch than what he's done in the last decade or so. And,
one of them here in my hand, The Third Murder, another film of his, which is a courtroom drama, a fairly heavy courtroom drama. It's about fatherhood and righteousness and all that kind of stuff. So exactly what you mean. Both films. Well, interestingly, the recent film Shoplifting doesn't have anything on this DVD. There's really nothing but the movie here. And the other film, The Third Murder, has a bonus short on it and some other things by way of special features in Chinese with English subtitles.
Got some other stuff here. The Golem, or the Golem, however you want to pronounce it. This is from Epic, and it is. This is an English language film, but I'm only going to call it foreign because it's from the directors of Jerusalem with a Z, and it has a. Let's put it this way. It's basically foreign filmmakers, but the original Der Golem is a foreign film, which is one of the great German silent masterpieces, and it's one of the original silent horror films. It's often lumped in there with Nosferatu, right? All that stuff, and it's based on ancient Jewish lore, and it's sort of a Frankenstein tale of sorts. Monsters that are conjured through spiritualist means and whatnot. So this is a modern updating of that. I don't know that it's all that faithful to necessarily the legacy of the lore, but it's an interesting counterbalance to the fact that nobody has sought to make a Golem film or a Golem film. I hate to say Golem because it's the Lord of the Rings, a Golem. Yeah. No one's thought not to make a Golem film for generations, not since the silent era. It's a little bit surprising, and this is the first one. It's not the same plot by any means, but it's the same sort of milieu. There's a plague, and in this very, very close Jewish community, and it deals with all of the politics of being Jewish and persecuted. And a woman winds up conjuring up the spirit of a golem, and from there everything kind of goes haywire. The directors do an audio commentary, and there are a few featurettes and deleted scenes and so forth. There's even a little interview from Fright Fest. If this subject matter interests you, I think the movie will be interesting. But otherwise, it might not really be a whole lot of worth your time. There's also Claire's Camera, which is directed again a Korean director, Hong Sang-soo, and it is kind of a Korean film and kind of a French film. This was at the Cannes Film Festival I think it was last year. Might have been the year before. I think it was the year before. And it co-stars Kim Min-hee, who is a Korean actress, and Isabelle Huppert, who is obviously the great French legendary Isabelle Huppert, who is also in a new film that I just reviewed on radio last Friday, and which is actually kind of a riot, which I'll talk about in a moment. But anyway, the idea here is that you have this French school teacher named Claire, and the movie is called Claire's Camera. And Isabelle Huppert plays a French school teacher, with a very unusual camera that she is brought to her first visit to the Cannes Film Festival. And she meets this young woman who is who's working for a Korean film company there. And the rest of the movie becomes this weird, sort of very low-key whodunit detective story where they are trying to solve something that's not really a crime. They're trying to solve I won't tell you. But the reason that they're going around playing detective is the most mundane and ridiculous and silly of things imaginable. The movie is really one of these very meditative kind of Euro-Asian two-handers where a couple of people just talk about a lot of stuff. It's almost like a Henry Jaglom movie.
Henry.
It sort of verges on that. It's like a South Korean Henry Jaglom movie shot in France with a French actress.
New Year's Day, Baby Fever, all that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's fine. It's it's a certain kind of film for a certain kind of person. This is from Cinema Guild. It's on Blu-ray. It looks nice. It looks better on Blu-ray than it certainly did even in the theaters. I saw this thing projected, and I thought it looked horrible. And on Blu-ray, way better. Also has a few extras on it, including reflections by Claire Denis, the French filmmaker, and then a director's dialogue at the New York Film Festival with Hong Sang-soo. It's perfectly fine.
Interesting stuff. Frantz Fanon, Black Skin, White Mass, is an interesting documentary from 1995 about Frantz Fanon, who is the author of The Wretched Earth, a fairly famous book. This one is too. So this is sort of like a documentary with reenactments in it, right? So Frantz was a psychoanalyst and theorist, and most of the writing that he did back in the 50s and the late 40s and the 50s. He passed away, I think, in the early 60s, if I'm not mistaken.
Haitian-born, or some kind of Caribbean.
I want to say Martinique.
Martinique, yeah.
I want to say Martinique.
Yeah.
So black, French, and he was writing about colonialism mostly and what it meant to be colonized, colonialism all over the world. It's really, really interesting stuff. He was writing at the same time of the sort of black activist, black power movement here in the United States. So guys like Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, they were all reading him at the time. This is a very, very interesting but fairly short sort of docudrama reenactment kind of thing with Colin Salmon. Colin Salmon is a British actor that anybody who watches a lot of British detective shows will know. He was in all those MI shows, MI this and MI that, and Prime Suspect.
Yeah.
And, when you see his face, you'll be like, oh, that guy. So he's been around for years. It's very nice. Bonus features include Between Two Worlds by Mark Nash and an essay written by the filmmakers here, as well as Mark Nash. Interesting stuff if you're interested into sort of psychoanalytical, theoretical, socioeconomic.
Heavy Trip on DVD. Man, did I have fun with this movie. This movie is so bananas. This is this is from Finland. Now, here's the thing you got to know about the Finns. The Finns have the wackiest, most offbeat sense of humor of anybody in Europe.
Indeed.
They really do. More so even than the English. They are really, when the Finns go nutty, they go really nutty. I'm a huge fan of the Finnish band, the Leningrad Cowboys, subject of a number of Kaurismäki movies, which are all on Criterion now, which I've seen them play live. I love the Leningrad Cowboys. So here's what's going on in Heavy Trip. You've got a bunch of total losers in Finland who are they're a heavy metal band. They're just four complete and total losers in a heavy metal band, and they have been rehearsing for like 15 years. They've never played a gig. All they've ever done is rehearse. They just rehearse in one guy's garage or barn every few days, and that's it. They never expect to actually play a gig. They're just waiting for that big gig. And finally, through a bizarre circumstance, they wind up thinking, somewhat incorrectly, that they've been invited to a heavy metal festival in Norway. So they're like, rock on! So now they're going to go play their big gig in Norway. And how do I do this without giving anything away? So there's tragedy that besets them. I can't really tell you what the tragedy is, but nonetheless, they manage to overcome it and go on this absolutely just hilariously freakish road trip to get themselves to the big heavy metal fest in Norway. There's so much in the middle that I'm not getting into that I can't because it would give all the jokes away. But this thing is an absolute stone cold riot. It is really, really, really funny. And the name of the band, I can't tell you how badly I want to tell you the name of the band, but I can't. It's part of the joke. When they come up with the band name in the movie, you're going to be just weeping in tears. You'll be laughing so hard. It's just not to be believed. It's so funny. So anyway, the movie is called Heavy Trip. And I wish it was on Blu-ray. I really do, because it's a nicely shot movie as well. But it isn't. It's just on DVD, and you got to check it out. It's a whole lot of fun.
Oh, and I Am Not a Witch. This was an interesting movie that we were talking about a little bit this past awards season. BAFTA award-winning film. It's about a little girl who, after a goofy incident in her village, is accused of being a witch, and she's sent off to witch camp. They actually have these places where they would send the people. She's the only little girl at this quote unquote witch camp. They take a ribbon and tie it to her, and they tie the ribbon to the ground or to other things, and they tell her that if she attempts to escape, that she will turn into a goat. And this is the sort of thing that actually happens. It's very provocative. In places like that, so present-day Zambia is where this all takes place, and it's sort of reflective of a tragic thing, but at the same time, it's sort of funny and a little bit ridiculous, and it is revealing of some of the sort of colloquial ideas that exist all around the world, even into this very day. There are some people who believe in some perfectly insane things, and this is one of them. Although it is, like I said, actually kind of funny. I Am Not a Witch, written and directed by Ragano Nayoni.
Outrage Coda. There was a moment when Takeshi Kitano's movies came here routinely in the kind of throughout the 90s. He had that moment, and I interviewed him at one point, and he I think won an award at the Cannes Film Festival at one point too, and then he's kind of fallen off the radar a little bit now. I don't know why. They continue to be really, really good. He just has it's that deadpan style of his, that sort of cynical deadpan sense of tragicomedy that is
maybe the audience changed. I don't know.
Could be, but anyway, he continues to be great. He obviously bills himself as an actor as Beat Takeshi, and then as a director he's Takeshi Kitano. Must be a thing in Japan. Anyway, this is a sequel to Outrage, and ergo the name Outrage Coda. And it is, in theory, allegedly the last chapter of all of his Yakuza movies, which I would be sad if that were the case. But anyway, he plays this is basically a Kinji Fukasaku movie with his unique sense of humor twisted onto it, which means it's all about Yakuza wars. And that's all it is. It's warring Yakuzas. But it has a little bit of an interesting present-day twist on it that involves, some economics and some politics and dealings with South Korea and business culture. And it's good, even though it's very specific in the things that it comments on culturally. It's really, really, it's so well done, and it has all of his trademark flourishes, and I just think the world of the guy. I wish it was also on Blu-ray, but it isn't. This is from Film Movement. It's only on DVD, but it would be great to have on Blu-ray. It's a really cool looking movie. Outrage Coda, sequel to Takeshi Kitano's Outrage.
I have Happy Hour here, a fairly interesting film that was at the Locarno Film Festival, about these Japanese women. 4 of them. The film begins with 4 of them. They're good friends. They can sort of tell each other everything. A couple of them are married. One of them is divorced. One of them goes through a bad divorce.
Oh.
And then this just sort of disappears in an almost sort of like what's that L'Avventura, the Antonioni film?
Yeah.
So people just disappear from the movie, and the other are left wondering what happened, and they sort of go through their lives and start examining everything. It's really sort of interesting.
I think you and I catch a lot of flack for liking L'Avventura because a lot of other people around here don't care for it.
They don't care. Yeah. Bonus features on this film include some cast interviews. It's a lovely and sort of emotional film set inside the lives of these 4 women and told from their point of view, and I rather like it for that reason alone.
Got 3 French films here that are worth talking about. One is by Xavier Giannoli, starring Vincent Linden, who continues to be a really amazing actor. I used to criticize him for being just kind of wooden and very Gary Cooper-like, and he just has found a groove with nuance that makes him such an interesting actor now.
Along with that face, because
face.
He's developed one of those faces.
Yeah, and he knows how to use it.
Yeah,
in a really subtle way. Anyway, this is interesting. This is called The Apparition, and it's about a guy, a really kind of a troubled journalist, who is asked to lead an investigation into a Virgin Mary sighting. An apparition of the Virgin Mary, a vision, as it were, and it's that journey, that investigation, that is really, really very interesting. Not just in terms of the investigation, but what it does to him personally.
And they hire him because he's a journalist.
Yes, exactly.
And he's known for getting just journalistic and all that kind of stuff. But it brings into question all sorts of issues.
All kinds of stuff. Giannoli previously made the movie Marguerite, which was also very, very good, and does an interview here. And there's it's just a beautifully, beautifully made film. It's
kind of movies of a theme, aren't they?
They are, sort of. And this is another really good one. This received a bunch of critical attention, I guess about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Won an award at the Césars, was a big deal at 2000. I guess it was 2014. It's been some time. 2014 in France. It's called Hippocrates, Diary of a French Doctor, by a director named Thomas Lilty, who was not on my radar before, but pretty much is now. And this, the French do a very good job of going into workplaces and really kind of doing a penetrating examination of people in particular locations and environments, very often schools. But like it could happen today, which was a wonderful Tavernier film set in a public school system. Or even the Class, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. This kind of does the same thing from the point of view of a Paris hospital, and uses a young doctor played by Vincent Lacoste as sort of the eyes and the ears of this place. This was a film we had to watch for Kolkoa. This was in the running with Kolkoa a few years ago. And I remember we were all really, really impressed by it. It isn't like an American medical drama. This isn't Grey's Anatomy. This really does kind of look at what it means to be a doctor, what it means to become a doctor, what demands it places on your personal life, on your time, on your relationships. And it also kind of puts the French medical system on trial in an interesting way. So in any case, Thomas Lilty, who directed it, as it happens, is also a physician, and you can tell that he definitely brings a sense of having been there and done that to it. And a wonderful supporting performance by Reda Kateb, who won a César for supporting actor. And then the third one here is Gauguin, Voyage to Tahiti, starring Vincent Cassel. Gauguin has been depicted in a lot of movies. Also in the Willem Dafoe.
Eternity's Gate.
Eternity's Gate.
Yeah.
He's depicted in that by Oscar Isaac.
Oscar Isaac, yeah.
And my favorite is still Anthony Quinn in Lust for Life.
Yeah.
I love Anthony Quinn in Lust for Life. I think
opposite
he absolutely
Kirk, right?
Opposite Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
And I thought Anthony Quinn perfectly captured, the spirit of what I always imagined to be Gauguin. I don't know that Vincent Cassel is the best person to cast as Gauguin, but he definitely got the movie made, and he's a great actor. The problem here is that this is not really even a story. As everybody probably knows by now, Gauguin abandoned his family at a certain point, went to Tahiti, and lived sort of the life of a libertine pauper there. Wound up marrying like a 14-year-old girl, and impregnating her, and there's a whole lot of really kind of
people trying to they often skip that bit of the story.
But
all those beautiful girls in those paintings,
you're sleeping with them,
and they were girls,
they were all underage, and but it's Tahiti, he could get away with it.
That's
So, but in any case, all this really is just sort of a very artful, angsty recreation of that whole period and ordeal and those events. And it's interesting, but at a certain point, about 45, 50 minutes in, you kind of start looking at your watch thinking, is this really going to start doing anything? Or are we just going to keep living in Tahiti and sleeping with young girls and painting paintings and making no money? And that's kind of all it is. It really doesn't go anywhere other than that. It's sort of very repetitive and very elongated. And you're supposed to sort of be carried along by Vincent Cassel's performance, but it's not enough. You still need a story. So I admire the craft, and I admire sort of the general idea, but it needed more of a script. Really needed more of a script. And that is a Blu-ray from Cohen. Beautiful to look at, but really needed more meat on its bones.
Moko Jumbi is an interesting little film here, set mostly in Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad. It's about this young Trinidadian woman who grew up in the UK and then goes back to her family home. in Trinidad, and she runs into this boy who lives across the road, a different tribe, because they're Africans and they're these sort of indigenous Indian people, and all of these things are sort of irrelevant in the context of this society. Anyway, she falls in love with the boy. They have this sort of tattoo fetish thing going on with each other. She has this very this auntie, domineering auntie, who wants her to break it off. So it becomes this bit of a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing. Although there is this sort of underlying spiritual aspect to it. The Moko Jumbi is this sort of spiritual figure of these tall, slender sort of spirits that wander around the sugarcane fields. And if you follow your true love, if you fall in love and follow your love, they'll lead you to love. It's interesting stuff. A lot of cultural sort of and gothic stuff. DVD specials include a trailer and an audio commentary with the director Visconti Anderson.
So Hong Sang-soo, who did Claire's Camera, which we talked about earlier, a better Hong Sang-soo movie from just this last year is The Day After. And this was at a few different festivals, including the Toronto Film Festival, and this is a significantly more interesting movie. Perhaps because he's not in France and sort of trying to direct Isabelle Huppert and all this other stuff at the same time. In any case, this is actually quite funny, and which is not necessarily easy with South Korean movies, because South Korean sense of humor and sense of comedy doesn't always translate very well. But in any case, this is about a book publisher who has been having an affair, and his wife finds out, and it blows it up. And now he has a new office manager who comes in at the worst possible time in his life and his career, and has to somehow try to help him get his life put back together on the day after, right? So that's the idea here. And it has some really interesting stylistic tweaks in it. It does a little, some interesting stuff with black and white photography, and it really goes into some interesting and wry observations about life and love that are completely disconnected from any culture. They're universal in every conceivable way, and it's a really, really good film. So Hong Sang-soo, very famous Korean filmmaker, not necessarily that well known outside of South Korea, throughout the world, but really this one is winning, The Day After, and that is also released by Cinema Guild.
The Unknown Soldier. Here's a film by Aku. How do you pronounce his last name, Wade?
Oh dear, I'm gonna Aku Luhimis.
I
guess.
Anyway,
something. Yeah, it's the Finnish names. Finnish names are always a nightmare. That's why I didn't pronounce any names from Heavy Trip, because there was no way I was going to jump into the Lushishvili.
Oh my God, with all those consonants and consonants and consonants. Anyway, this is a movie that's set in the middle of World War II. Finland is a small country. They found that they essentially had to ally themselves with the Nazis, at least that was from their point of view. And this is all about these people, this particular soldier, the family that he's dealing with, and how they are trying to navigate that territory between being allied with the Nazis and not really wanting to be allied with the Nazis, and trying to survive until the damn war is over. It's actually a fairly moving film. Few bonus features. This is a Blu-ray, by the way. Few bonus features include the making of The Unknown Soldier and some deleted scenes.
We've got a movie called Ferafeza, otherwise known as Ships, by Elif Refig. And this is a Turkish film from 2013. I hope I didn't mutilate the title of it. This is from IndiePix. Specifically IndiePix Limited, which it can also be seen on Prime Video on Amazon Prime, and it's one of those working class Turkish films that I'm not sure they can necessarily even make anymore right now. The situation in Turkey is such that I think there's been a real damping of the freedom to make just about anything that they want. So we'll see how long that necessarily goes. But this also comes with a DVD extra of a short film made by director Elif Refig. And this is a woman, by the way. Elif Refig is a woman, a female Turkish filmmaker, which is also very, very unusual. And it deals with just a young working class man who works in the shipyards and he's looking to make something of his life. And one day he sees something that really, really touches him, and meets up with the creator of this something. And I'm going to be very circumspect here so as to not give it all away. And it is how that relationship and that discovery changes him in a very, very existential way. It's a thoughtful film. It's something of an allegory, and it's really worth checking out, even if you're not necessarily into Turkish films, which can be very, very slow and protracted. Also have a couple of other films here from Distrib. Monsieur and Madame Adelman by Nicholas Beddoes, and director Pierre Godot's Down by Love, starring Adele Exarchopoulos and Guillaume Gallienne. Both of these are really, really good. Distrib continues to find all kinds of great films, mostly French these days. But Monsieur and Madame Adelman won the Audience Award at Kolkoa here. And I remember everyone really, really liked this film. It is it's essentially just several decades in the life and romance of a couple, and it starts in the 1970s and it goes pretty much to the present day, and it's just wonderful, and it's so honest, and it's just so charming and sweet, and I wish it was on Blu-ray, but it's not. Strip needs to put this out on Blu-ray because it's also beautifully shot. It wonderfully shows off Paris. And similarly engaging, although in a very different way, is Down by Love, which is a little bit darker. Adele Exarchopoulos, who from Blue is the Warmest Color, is this kind of very troubled woman who meets a guy played by Guillaume Gallienne, and they meet under, let's say, very oppressive circumstances. Again, I'm trying not to give stuff away. And their romance, unlike the other one, is not just all love and fluff and cotton and daisies. It's rough and tumble and difficult, and has all kinds of rather disturbing tangential issues. And it's all centered around where they meet and how they meet, which I'm not going to tell you because you need to watch the movie. And it's really good. Down by Love for the dark side of romance in France, and Monsieur and Madame Adelman for the wonderful, wonderful, charming side of it. Very, very good.
And I have Marquise, a 1997 film starring Sophie Marceau. And Lambert Wilson and a few other people who were all sort of happening at that time. This film is about the actress Marquise, that's the name of the film, Marquise, who came up from poverty to be the favorite of King Louis. For a long time anyway. Racine, the noted playwright of the era, wrote parts just for her. In any case, like all of these movies, it ends tragically for the mistress, because this was a time when things always ended tragically for the mistress. I remember seeing this movie. And I think it might have been the first or second time I even saw Sophie Marceau in a film, more than 20 years ago now, and just thinking to myself, this is not the greatest movie in the world, but she is fantastic.
I love Sophie Marceau so much.
And it's been around for a while. Then, and nevertheless, interesting stuff. On Blu-ray, bonus features include an interview with the director, Vera Belmont, and an essay about all of these historical characters, which is also kind of interesting.
Two Blu-rays here. Cohen Film Collection, Peppermint Soda by Diane Kurys, the great French director. And the other one is, from Kino, two-disc set of early works by Clouzot. Henri-Georges Clouzot, not the Inspector Clouzot. Peppermint Soda, the Diane Kurys film from Cohen, is really very, very sweet. It's Diane Kurys just cranks movies out, and they're all so good. This is from 1977, and this is actually her directing debut. And it was recently re-released theatrically, and Cohen has now put it out on Blu-ray, and thank goodness they have, because you see everything that has continued to make all of her films so good manifest in her very, very first film. And she came on storming hard in the 1970s as kind of one of a new generation that were heirs to the French New Wave, with very realistic, character-oriented, very stylistically very a hyper realistic, almost near realistic approach to French life. And this all takes place in 1963. It's essentially a teen coming of age story, very much autobiographical, but it's absolutely beautiful and wonderfully acted and very meticulously directed. It's a new 2K restoration of the film, transferred to Blu-ray, and it is gorgeous. The Clouzot, the early works, is look. If you're a fan of Clouzot, you obviously know his movies like Wages of Fear and Diabolique, and the stuff that really gets the Criterion treatment normally. This goes back to the 1930s when he was really just starting out and kind of honing his craft. 2 discs. 7 films total, including the short film "The Terror of Batignolles" from 1931, which is really, really good. And then an hour-long film, "I'll Be Alone After Midnight." The others are all feature-length: "Dragnet Night," "The Unknown Singer," "My Cousin from Warsaw," "Tell Me Tonight," and "Dream Castle." These are not his best films. They're in some cases he's just really kind of doing workmanlike work for someone else. But you do see his style developing. You see his sensibilities developing. You see the things that he wants to pay attention to, the things he doesn't want to pay attention to. And so if you really want to study the work of Clouzot and find out how he came to be that great, intense filmmaker that we all know from his classics, you definitely want to check this out. This is a wonderful collection. Clouzot, the early works.
Jupiter's Moon was a really interesting sort of a film about a Syrian refugee that I found striking. So you have this young man, Syrian refugee, and he escapes. He gets himself shot, and he ends up in this refugee camp. This doctor goes to work on him and fixes him up. And what he finds out, and this is when the film becomes sort of mystical and spiritual, as these films do, is that this young man can levitate. At will, he can simply make himself float up into the air. The doctor is kind of crooked and figures out a way that some money can be made from this. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. That while in fact sci-fi, it's about much, much more than just the science fiction of what's going on. It has to do with the refugee issue. It has to do with the Middle East in general. It has to do with perception and the desire to get away from all of these things. It's a really, really lovely, lovely film. I wish that there were more on it in terms of special features, but not, no. Unfortunate there.
Yeah.
To Sleep with Anger, a 1990 Charles Burnett film. One of the first films on Criterion. This is on Criterion. One of the first films that I actually reviewed as a professional film critic.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Among this one in 1990, did the junket for this too. Charles Burnett, of course, Killer of Sheep.
Truly, one of he's sort of the great filmmaker of the L.A. Rebellion.
Yeah. And not nearly didn't work nearly as much as Glass
should still be
Glass
working.
Shield.
Yeah.
It was another film that he did. Michael Boatman. I think this might have been his 3rd film. This is just an amazing film. It's set in South Central Los Angeles, which is where Charles Burnett grew up. But he's from the South. He was a part of the great diaspora. Yeah. He would be about 75 now, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm looking it up.
Thank you very much. And this film has Danny Glover playing a Southern
74.
guy. 74. Almost
should
right
still be directing, man.
Still be working, man.
Yeah.
And Danny Glover comes into this home in South Central Los Angeles, and he just starts stirring up trouble. He's charismatic, and he has this great charm, but just the way he does things stirs up trouble. And it's all about how this outsider comes into this home, and a lot of it really has to do with the community. And it has to do with, in fact, that diaspora of black folks who came up from the South and the ones who came here, and how there's a certain amount of resentment between families with that sort of thing. This is what's neat about this movie. This is a wonderful, wonderful movie. But as I look at the cast, when I was watching this movie in 1990 and talk to these people, I did not realize. I'm talking to Mary Alice. I'm talking to Richard Brooks. I'm talking to Cheryl Lee Ralph, Carl Lumley, Vanetta McGee. Danny Glover, of course, is in the film. Regina King is in this movie. Man, it's really just one of those. Sometimes you just don't know. Cy Richardson in the movie, that you're in the midst of people who are going to do some really interesting things.
It's so upsetting to me, and I'm very, very attached to Charles Burnett, partly because he was one of the pioneers of the UCLA film program, and was part of it, a generation before I was there. But some of those people were still connected to the program when I was there, and from the LA Rebellion in particular, which was a group of black filmmaking students in the 1970s who really decided to try to form their own movement independent of what was happening in blaxploitation. That they wanted to go into a more artistic direction, a more personal direction, personal stories. And
stories that reflected the community.
It reflected the community.
And again, this is a generation before Boys in the Hood.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And he was the one that broke out.
Yeah.
And
what was the African Penitentiary made those penitentiary movies? I forget his name, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And Julie Dash was part of that too.
Julie Daughters of the Dust.
Julie was part of that too. So it's it's a really significant group that left a residue for a lot of us that came after. Also on Criterion, we got 3 others. Ingmar Bergman's Shame, which is also part of the giant Bergman box set, which we still haven't covered completely on this thing because it's just so enormous. But so if you get the box set, you're going to get Shame in it. You don't need to get it separately. But if you want to get it separately, you can. This is not one of my favorite Bergman films, made in 1968. It stars Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann as a couple of artists, who live on this small farm on an island, which then becomes subject to a war around them. And it's similar in some respects to a film that Godard made, which is it Les Carabiniers? Might be Les Carabiniers. I forget which one it is. But there's a Godard film that's a little bit similar to this. And it's, as a meditation on the effect of war on people, it is very powerful. It is visually extraordinary. I mean, it's, like everything else that he did with Sven Nykvist, it's dazzling. But it does get a little bit tedious at times. So it's it's almost like he runs out of story and sometimes has to sort of he has to vamp a little bit stylistically and visually to keep your interest. But it definitely is one of his more unusual films, one of his riskier films, and I can't fault him for that. It's called Shame. And then there's also Death in Venice, the famous Luchino Visconti movie from 1971. This is quintessential Visconti, based on the great Thomas Mann novella. And it's incomparable, and it comes with tons and tons of great extras, including a 2008 documentary about Visconti called Life as in a Novel. This has Burt Lancaster and Silvana Magnani and Marcello Mastroianni in the documentary. And then there's an excerpt from a 1990 show that's about the music in Visconti's films with Dirk Bogarde and Marissa Berenson from Barry Lyndon fame. And there's even a short 1970 behind-the-scenes documentary called Visconti's Venice, which is also very, very good. So Death in Venice, absolutely classic novella, and an equally classic film by Luchino Visconti, gets the Criterion treatment on Blu-ray. Fantastic.
Also, from a lovely Criterion box, Fassbinder's Berlin Alexanderplatz.
Love it.
Fantastic. So this is a television series from, I think, the early 80s, maybe the late 70s. But early 80s, right?
Yeah. I think it was early 80s.
So this is about, in the late 1920s, there was this guy named Franz Bibikoff, and he was released from prison, and he goes back into his Berlin city, to Berlin, to this particular neighborhood of Berlin, which is what this is about. Alexanderplatz is this area. And what the film does is follow this character, who's a character from a novel, and it's mostly, though, about this neighborhood, this very particular community in 1920s Berlin. And it's a fascinating film, wonderful to watch. This box set has all kinds of stuff on it. 4 Blu-ray special edition features are here. It's just really, look, I mean, Fassbinder is a controversial filmmaker, always has been, but his insight into the sort of human condition, I think, is undeniable.
Being prolific. What would be the word? His profligacy, I guess, is the other thing that always blew me away. It's one thing when you're making a movie. I mean, he's like Takashi Miike. He made movies constantly, and he was in his 20s. He's just writing them and directing them, writing them and directing them, writing them and directing them, writing them, and just constantly. I mean, always cranking something out at just a rapid rate. And then something like Berlin Alexanderplatz isn't just one movie. It's hours and hours and hours. It's
14 or 15 hours.
It's hundreds of pages of stuff to write and shoot. It's his brain never stopped working. It was just an amazing thing to the genius of Fassbinder. But he burned out young.
Yeah,
they all do.
They had to get it done fast.
They're like road flares. He just burned out early. I'm going to knock out a few Twilight Times here on the new quartet of Twilight Time titles, and then we're gonna wrap the show out with new releases from Arrow and Arrow Academy. And boy, are there a ton, and are they a riot. From Twilight Time, and you can get all of these at TwilightTimeMovies.com exclusively. We start with Success Spoil Rock Hunter. I love this movie. I can't believe they snatched this one away from Fox and put it out on Blu-ray, and what a great movie. Frank Tashlin, best known for so many terrific Jerry Lewis movies, directed this one, which is still probably the best satire about advertising ever. Made in 1957. Tony Randall basically playing the ad man at the middle of this, and it is, it's just everything this says about advertising is still true.
Yeah.
What was going on in the 1950s is true now, just in a slightly different way, but it is just such a scathing satire. And it's the best thing that Jane Mansfield has ever done. Her character of Rita Marlowe is absolutely wonderful. And allegedly, according to the notes too, Godard loves this movie, which makes me almost want to question my love for it. But in any case, there's an audio commentary with film historian Dana Poland, some newsreels, and the usual Twilight Time isolated music track. We also have, very timely, the passing of Stanley Donen this last week, about 2 weeks ago. Stanley Donen made so many great movies, and one of them was Bedazzled. Bedazzled is an absolutely wonderful classic Stanley Donen movie from 1967, and it stars Dudley Moore and Peter Cook, who were a famous comedy team, and this is probably their best work together. It's just those two, directed by Stanley Donen, it just doesn't get any better. It is absolutely wonderful. It is hilarious. This thing was remade some years later, not very well, but it's a wonderful, wonderful comedic twist on the Faust tale, and it's a priceless classic. It's just wonderful. Has isolated music and effects. Has an appearance of Peter Cook and Dudley Moore on the Paul Ryan Show, not the Paul Ryan who was recently Speaker of the House in the United States. This is a different Paul Ryan. And Harold Ramis talking about why Bedazzled is so awesome. We also have the Admirable Crichton. Directed by Lewis Gilbert. And based on the play by J.M. Barrie of Peter Pan fame. Probably not obviously as well known as Peter Pan, but typically great Barrie material. And this was also made in 1957. And it's a story of a butler who has a desert island experience, and it is really, really worth checking out. It is, if you've never seen this, it's a very interesting and unusual take on the desert island experience. Let's just say that it's extremely well done, and Kenneth More as in the title character is really, really wonderful. It's a really good movie. The Admirable Crichton. And then lastly, Oliver Stone's Talk Radio. Somehow Twilight Time snagged Talk Radio, which is Oliver Stone's filmed version of the Eric Bogosian play. Yeah. And it basically is a filmed play.
With Eric, if I'm not mistaken.
With Eric, yeah. And it's basically a filmed play, but it's quite good. For something that was done very low key the year after Born on the 4th of July, he kind of wanted to just take it down. That was a big film, an epic film, and Stone wanted to kind of go the other direction and do something small and quick and not terribly logistically challenging, and that's what this was. And it's loosely based on an actual figure, but don't worry too much about that. Bogosian is great. It could use a little opening up and be a little bit less of a play, but in terms of shock radio, not much has changed, I gotta say.
Yeah. He even looked like Howard Stern back in the day. Yeah. Bogosian, Kevin Costner's Waterworld.
Oh my gosh,
1995. Man, this was a moment in Hollywood. Spent an incredible amount of money on this movie. Built that big theme park association with it out at, what was it, Universal? I think it was Universal, if I'm not mistaken. Film tanked at the box office. Took it on the chin. All kinds of controversy having to do with Kevin Costner, and I believe who's his buddy who directed that, Reynolds.
Oh, Kevin Reynolds, yeah.
And it's sort of going back and forth with all that kind of stuff. And a lot of folks say that Kevin Costner really sort of took the movie over, and there were issues. There were issues, and the boys were never the same again.
Good friend of mine was working for the effects shop at the time, and he's the one who sculpted the gills. He didn't design the gills; he just sculpted the gills that wound up on Kevin Costner's neck.
Interesting, which is what the movie is about. By the way, a lot of folks didn't really get what this movie was about. What's interesting now, though, because what happens in the movie is that the polar ice caps melt. Thus creating the Waterworld.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me say that again to folks who aren't paying attention. What happens in the movie is that the polar ice caps melt. Anyway, 1995, a wee bit prescient, although the conditions. This is packed full of all kinds of stuff. On here in terms of special features. Has this been around before? Has this been out? This has a little booklet and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, this has been out released, but this is the special edition now from Arrow. They went and did the Criterion number on it, and it's a little weird movie to do a Criterion kind of a treatment on, but at the same time, it is kind of notorious.
Yeah. It's kind of this one and The Postman are the two Kevin Costner. We loved The Post. People again weren't paying attention to what the movie is about, folks.
Yeah.
You know, they were just busy taking pot shots at Kevin. Anyway, this was a pretty neat film so far as I remember back in the day, and it's kind of prescient nowadays. 3 discs in this box and a neat little booklet too. The Apartment from 1960. Oh my God, this movie! You know what's funny about this movie?
Billy Wilder. One Best Picture.
A 1960 movie. Billy Wilder, I.A.L. Diamond, writing with him, Jacqueline, Cheryl MacLaine, Fred McMurray, all that stuff. Now, here's the thing about this movie that's interesting to me. This movie is about these men who have a spot, one of their coworkers' apartment, where they can take their mistress, generally speaking, this one secretary, and have sex with her.
Yep.
Let's think about that again in the context of a post-Me Too sort of Matt Lauer, Les Moonves world. This film is about those guys and how they behave, yet it is in the context of this Billy Wilder the movie. It's a comedy. A fairly lighthearted romp of a comedy, although there is some contemplation of suicide in it by one or two of the people. Interesting, though, right? The sort of content and the way it can exist in 1960 in the exact same content. You cannot make this movie today with that. Not in this way, anyway.
No, not even close.
I have The Prisoner, Alex Guinness film. Peter Glenville's The Prisoner, not the one with Patrick McGowan, the television series, which you know. Alec Guinness, Jack Hawkins film. This was a controversial film. It was banned from Cannes in the Venice Film Festival when it came out because they said that it was pro-Soviet propaganda. The film is basically set in about 1957. Is some unnamed sort of Eastern European country. There's this very powerful cardinal who goes into interrogation, and they know that they're not going to be able to. It's not like 1984, but you have a sort of dynamic there where there's this interrogation going on, where this interrogator is trying to. Alec Guinness plays the cardinal is trying to break this cardinal, but he knows he can't do it with torture. He knows he has. So it's an interesting sort of notion. This film was banned.
Yeah, that used to happen.
A lot.
Doesn't happen anymore.
There's nothing remotely bannable in this film.
No,
in any way, shape, or form today, which is what's interesting.
Movies don't get banned anymore.
No.
They just wind up on Bravo.
Oh they might. Yeah, exactly. That's your punishment for making your dumbass movie. Unless you're what's his name. Lars got banned.
Yeah.
No, well, he got banned.
Well,
from Cannes.
He got banned by from Cannes because he said something like
about Nazis.
Something like Hitler was cute in a dress, or I don't know, it was something weird,
stupid. But you know what? That's not even going to happen anymore because you know what? You're stupid, and we're not even going to bother to ban you. Go away.
Yeah.
Anyway, The Prisoner.
All right, we got some interesting little genre gems here, also from Arrow. Phantom Lady by noir expert Robert Siodmak, who made this movie in 1944, right around the end of World War II. And it's kind of a neglected movie in his oeuvre a little bit. But as kind of a mid-level noir, it's actually it's not bad actually. It deals with there's a murder, and the funny thing about the murder is it's about it's strangulation by necktie, which I always thought was hilarious because as a man who does occasionally wear neckties, I don't know how anybody could get strangled by those
No.
things. You know what I'm saying? It would just come undone.
You could be just made uncomfortable to death. But the tie wouldn't actually kill
It
you.
wouldn't. Anyway, it's it's good writing stuff, but it would never actually happen in real life. But in any case, so you got the strangulation by necktie, you got the alibi, who really did it, what so Cornell Woolrich, who was kind of a mid-level pulp writer, wrote the original novel. And this is a fun discovery. Some cute stuff on here. A lot of great extras. Including Dark and Deadly 50 Years of Film Noir, which is a documentary with all kinds of great interview subjects. And then there's even a 1944 radio production for Lux Radio Theater of Phantom Lady, which is really, really cool. We've also got Color Me Blood Red, which was the last installment in Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood trilogy. I recommend this only if you just can't get enough Herschel Gordon Lewis. If you have the other two and you've just got to complete your Herschel Gordon Lewis Gore trilogy, by all means, go get it. It's probably the weakest of the three in every conceivable way. It's not as interesting or as gory, and by this time, he's already shocked everybody he could possibly shock. So there isn't much left here. It's about the story deals with a painter who let's just say this is kind of like his version of Corman's with the guy with the sculptor
who just died.
Yes. Why are we drawing a blank on that?
Why are we drawing? But you know what I'm talking about.
Anyway, where the Bucket of Blood.
He just died.
Dick Miller.
Dick just died. Yeah.
So it's this is sort of like Herschel Gordon Lewis's version of Bucket of Blood with Dick Miller, which is you got an artist who can't quite figure out where his he's having kind of a lull, let's say, and his girlfriend cuts her finger, and he realizes that's it. I need blood to make my art, and there you go. The rest is history. It's a Herschel Gordon Lewis movie, and then the last of these three is Horror Express. Horror Express is actually really, really good. This is one of those hammery pairings of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, and it's pretty silly. It's one of those train horror thrillers where it's like zombies and all kinds of monstrous goings on a train that is bound for Moscow, and it doesn't really make any sense. Who cares? It is what it is. Co-production with Spain, and comes with tons of extras, interviews with everybody imaginable, some featurettes, and the usual. But otherwise, you're watching it mainly for Cushing and Lee, and they make the best of a bad lot. Telly Savalas also shows up in this thing for some strange reason.
Interesting. The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion is a fairly interesting sort of Italian thriller. By Luciano Erlicoli. This is actually a pretty neat movie. What you basically have is this sort of it's not a triangle because there are four folks involved. You got this business guy.
Quadrangle,
which
would be a square.
Yeah, which would be a square or a rectangle. There's a blackmail is going on. He has an affair with her. Some photographs were taken. He's blackmailing her, and there's a twist and a turn and all that kind of stuff. And it's a pretty neat little film. What's interesting here is that the special edition has all kinds of new stuff on it, including this 2K restoration from the original camera negative. So Arrow Films is actually doing right by this particular movie.
Nice.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all.
Got a couple by director Joseph H. Lewis here, who was a workman-like B-movie guy back in the day, and came out of Poverty Row, and proceeded to make some noirs and some dramas, and really have kind of an interesting mid-level career, and made a lot of movies that really kind of transcended their budgets and their casts, and two of those are right here, also from Arrow Academy. The first is My Name is Julia Ross. The other one is So Dark the Night. Both of them come with heaps and heaps of extras. So Dark the Night is probably the most interesting of them. It's a real kind of a twisty-turny Hitchcockian thing that deals with a detective in France who goes out into the countryside to kind of get away from all of his the stuff that he normally puts up with in Paris, and just kind of unwind a little bit. And there he finds both love and a mystery. And things get very twisty and dark after that. And it's kind of a little Agatha Christie in there, woven in there too. My Name is Julia Ross is also a mystery, slightly less interesting, but also a less interesting cast. And it all takes place in London. I think it was shot entirely in the U.S. though. But anyway, basically takes place in London and in this kind of crusty mansion, and some nasty goings on in the mansion, and we have to kind of figure out, is somebody, is there some gaslighting going on? What's actually happening in this quirky old mansion? I guess you could call it maybe a bargain basement Rebecca on some level. Maybe a little bit of Jane Eyre wrapped in here too, with touches of things like Vertigo. It kind of borrows from everything. It can't quite figure out what it needs to be, but if you are a fan of Joseph H. Lewis, you'll probably enjoy it for the most part. It definitely has its moments. And let's see.
A couple of the Italian ones to knock off here. Luigi Bozzoni's The Fifth Chord, starring Franco Nero. Neat little movie, kind of a thriller, with Franco playing this journalist, a bit of an alcoholic journalist, who finds himself on the trail of a serial killer, a murderer anyway. And what happens is the police think he did it, so he has to sort of sober up and figure out who actually did the killing before they put him away for it. Also by Luigi Bozzoni, The Possessed, along with Franco Rossellini, which is about a writer, again, who arrives in this small Italian village looking for this very specific woman. Everybody in the village tells him that she committed suicide some time ago. Yet no one can be very specific about anything. Where is she buried? When did it happen? Exactly what happened? The stories aren't straight. He can tell something wacky is going on and starts to investigate. Meanwhile, there is a strange woman in this movie who's walking around at the bottom of this lake, and it's kind of interesting. Bozzoni, look, a lot of this stuff just really comes out of the when Argento, the bird with the crystal plumage, and all that kind of stuff, and he ushered in that whole giallo period. And then the next thing you know, every Italian dude with a Super 8 camera was and a bottle of ketchup was making movies, just these gory sort of giallo movies, and they got away with it for about 20-25 years. Generally speaking, they weren't very good. These two are not that terrible. The Fifth Chord by Luigi Bozzoni and The Possessed by Luigi Bozzoni, along with Franco Rossellini.
We also have these two Japanese films here to wrap this out, and then one Criterion that I neglected to include previously. The Sister Street Fighter collection. So here's the deal. After the Street Fighter, starring Sonny Chiba, they thought, let's do a chick flick. Make a female Street Fighter. Let's do that. So they took Etsuko Shihomi, who was in Street Fighter in kind of a small part, gave her her own movie, made Sonny Chiba a supporting part. And in this one, she goes, she's half Chinese, half Japanese, and she goes to Yokohama to look for her brother, who's a cop who's disappeared. And there's a whole big tangled cartel thing, crime thing going on, and she and Sonny got to just go break some bones. Forget about the plot. It's just a lot of action and bone breaking. It's really great. And she's really good. And they included the follow-up films, which were completely negligible: Sister Street Fighter, Hanging by a Thread, Return of the Sister Street Fighter, and the final film, Sister Street Fighter Fifth Level Fist, which has nothing to do with any of the preceding ones. It just has a title that exploits it. That was all of these were done in the 1970s. And lots of extras here, fun stuff, isolated score highlights for the first three films, and all the original trailers. It's really a lot of fun. If you love this series, and I think this series is so awesome, it's because it just does it. It's completely unrestrained. And then talking about unrestrained, Takashi Miike's Audition.
Oh, wow.
Audition, man.
That movie messed. That movie. That movie. We were just talking about him.
Miike, and I've interviewed Miike and done commentary for one of his films. He's out of his mind, but in a really good way. But Audition is the thing that really brought him to the attention of a lot of people who'd never heard of him before in the United States. I mean, look, the bottom line is this movie makes men squeamish.
Yes.
It just takes grown men and turns them into, they just curl up in a fetal position after they've seen this. This is a tough movie to watch.
Yeah.
The climax is just.
Oh,
So here's the thing. I still remember really, really well. This was 1999.
Oh, yeah.
And that was
it's 20 years ago now.
20 years ago.
Oh,
that was my first year in LAFCA. And I remember we were voting at Michael Rechtschaffen's house, and everybody's packed in there, the usual thing, you know, and then voting away. And 3, 2, 1, 1 point to this director, 2 points to that director, and going around the room. And it comes around to Bob Strauss. Bob Strauss, who writes for the LA Daily News, and who is truly one of the funniest people I've ever known. And because he's so deadpan.
Yeah.
And Bob sits there in his very sort of deadpan-y way. 1 point for David Lynch, 2 points for, whatever. He's just doing his thing. Yeah. And he finally says, and 3 points to that lunatic who directed Audition. And that's all he said. And I laughed. I laughed so hard. I was in tears. I couldn't see through the tears for about 10 minutes. 3 points to that lunatic who directed Audition.
Yes,
didn't even have his name on the tip of his tongue.
Yes,
God bless Bob Strauss.
Yeah.
And then the very last thing here. Sorry, we forgot to include this earlier. Should have gone with the mention of Clouzot, because when we're transitioning from Clouzot over to Criterion, this got lost in the mix there a little bit. Henri-Georges Clouzot's La Vérité from 1960, starring Brigitte Bardot, which is an absolutely brilliant film. It's every bit the equal of especially something like Les Diaboliques. It is, but it doesn't really get enough attention. Anyway, it was Oscar nominated at the time in 1960, but kind of fell by the wayside thereafter. Really, really interesting. Maybe the best performance Brigitte Bardot has ever given on screen, and as someone accused of having murdered her lover, and she really, really goes to the wall with it, and it's a tremendous performance, and it's a really stylish film, and it has a lot to say about the social circumstances that contribute to these kinds of situations, and it's a great morality play. It's really a terrific morality play. So a lot of good extras on here. It's taken from a 4K digital restoration, and it includes a 60-minute documentary from 2017 all about Clouzot, which is superb, and a 1960 interview with him, as well as an interview with Brigitte Bardot from the 1982 documentary Brigitte Bardot Telle Quelle, which means as she is. Terrific movie, La Vérité.
She's so crazy.
Oh, she's out of her mind, but we love that.
That's okay.
All right. With that, we are done for this week, and we will see you guys next week.